Alright, today we're going to move on into our next chapter for access. I'll put a lecture file in Moodle, go ahead and download that. This chapter is relational database techniques. There's lots of useful information in these tutorials. You can go through those if you would like. There's actually some pretty advanced techniques in there that we're not going to cover in this class, but if you're curious about access, it has many useful applications. You can go through some of those tutorials to learn about those. Go ahead and open the lecture file and enable the content. You have to save it to the desktop. It starts off with those files. Go ahead and open up that. In this file you have 3 tables here and then 3 forms. I'm going to look at those files up there. There's lots of information in this chapter. I'm going to cover 2 objects with you. We're going to create a report, which will be something new, and I'm going to show you how to create a query and modify the query and create a calculated field. That's what we'll learn in this chapter, and you'll be testing on this. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is create a report. When you create objects, again, if we remember from the previous chapters, access is a relational database, which means that all of the data is in the tables here, and then all the other objects are just links to these tables, and they just display data in certain ways. The forms usually allow for user input. We're going to show today, we're going to make reports rather, and the reports are designed in a way for printing and a little bit more of a graphical representation of the data. So that's what the reports are for. So anytime you create an object in Access, you're going to usually create an object based on a table, because that's where all the data comes from. So it needs that relationship to the table in order to create. That's why it's called a relationship database. So what we're going to do is we'll create a report based on the customers table. So how you do that is you simply click on the customers. Don't double click because it'll open. You can't create it when it's open. You single click, you highlight the table, and then if you go to the Create tab, you have all your different groups of all the different objects that can be created in Access. Notice there's one that says Reports. There's several ways to create the report. Start off with a blank report, go to Design. In this case, for this class, we're just going to click on the Report button. So if you click there, it automatically generates and creates a report for you. Pulls the employee customers out, puts all the field names across here, and then it has all the data in here. So that's how you create a report based on a table. So we just created that report based on the customers table. It pretty much does everything for you and displays the data. Okay, then usually these reports are set up for printing. So usually you'll want to go and change the layout and the orientation of the paper. So that's what we'll do next. If we wanted to change this to landscape, notice since we created this report, we now have tools at the very, very top for this report. So it says report layout tools in the ribbon, and then we have more options for that object. So if we click on the page setup, inside the layout group, there's the orientation that you can set up. Portrait, landscape, or you can just set the data in columns. So in this case, we'll just change it to landscape. And you don't really see anything happen unless you were to take it into a print preview. Okay, we can go ahead and save that. To save the objects, you just click this little save button when it tells you to save an object. And it'll pop up and ask you what would you like the report to be named. And we could just leave it as customers, just press OK. And then notice we have a new group here for our reports. So let's go ahead and close that. Again, just press the little small X there to close the object. Let's create a report based on the transactions table. So if we click the transactions, go to create, and then you can just click report. And it gives you a list of transactions. Save that as transactions. And do one, close that, and do one for the products as well. And we'll leave that one open for right now. Notice how they're different based on the data that exists in the table. You still have the title of the table is put there, all your field names are across there. And then whatever data exists, it makes its own little field right there. Within the reports, you can format different. Notice right here the price is set up as dollars. If we wanted to change that, the way it's displayed, if you just click one of those, notice once I click one of the input boxes, it highlights the entire column. Because you usually deal with the data as a group when you're working with the forms or reports. So let's go and notice using our new tools over here. If we go to the format, we have our number formats just like we did in Excel. You have the currency, percent. Go ahead and change that to the comma style. Just push that and notice how the data changes within that. So it looks, it's very similar to working with the data in Excel. Same style, same number formats. So we can take it back to currency. If we press the down arrow here of this box, you also have several other types as well that you can use. Okay, any questions on the reports? Let's close this report. And it's going to ask you to save the changes, so we'll save it. And just keep it as products like we did the rest of them. Save it. Look, let's open up this customer's report in a different view. So close all of your objects here and right click on the customer report. And then at the very, very top you have two different views, layout view, design view. Layout view allows you to adjust the objects on the screen. design view allows you to change the fields that display in the report. Click the layout view. And then let's adjust these boxes. Notice that the total down here, 4, is chopped off. So if you click on it and you hold the mouse to the edges, you get the double arrow to where you can move them. So let's take the arrow down here and just make this a little bit larger so we can see the 4. And then if we look down here is the scroll bar all the way at the bottom. Scroll over to your report and let's take this page number and let's move it closer to somewhere in here. Notice if you have the mouse in the center, you get the 4-pointed arrow. That means you're going to move the entire box. So move it closer that way. So then I want to take both of these objects at the same time and move them down away from this text a little bit. So to click on the number first, and if you hold the Shift key, then you can select 2 of them. Then you can just hold your mouse in one and you can move them both as a group, left or right. You can also format them. So in this case, let's make them both bold. So if we go to the format area, we have the font group just like we did in Word and Excel, and you can press the bold button there, and it'll bold both of those at the same time. Okay, good. Questions on that? That's how you move around the objects and layout. Okay, go ahead and close that and save. Just as in the last chapter we imported data, you can also export data from Excel. So let's export our customer table. So if we just click on the customer table and we go to external data, remember we were using this import section, but if we look over here there's an export section as well. So we can export this table as an Excel worksheet. So click on Excel and then this screen comes up. It's going to automatically keep it in My Documents. That's where the file will actually be stored. You can leave that there. And it tells you that the format for the document will be Excel. Then you have to check your options down here. First one, we want to export the data with the formatting and the layout, so check that box. And then the next one says open the destination file after the export is complete. That way we can see the data and make sure that it actually did export. So check that box as well. And then press OK. And then Excel starts and it shows you, it looks exactly like the table did in Access. It kept all of our fonts, all of our background colors, all of the bold. And go ahead and close that. And then this screen pops up. We don't need to save the steps for later, we can just close. Let's export the products table as a PDF. So click the products table. And if we look in the export section, there's one that says PDF or XPS. Go ahead and click that. In this case, it asks you where to save it. So we can change it. Let's change it to the desktop for this case. You can leave it with its default name as products. Click Publish. And then if you wait just a few minutes, it should pop up with a PDF of our table. And we can close that. Once again, we get the save import steps. We don't need to do that, just click close. And then we'll take our transactions table and we will export that to Word. So if we look in our group, there isn't anything that says Word. Now there's a word merge for like mailing documents, but that's not what we want. So if we look down here in the More option and press the button, then we actually get Word there. We can use SharePoint, an object in a database, or HTML. So in this case, we're going to choose Word, click there. It asks you where it's going to be saved, and notice it just does an RTF or rich text file. It's not actually a Word document, but Word will convert it once we get there. And then let's click the button that says Open the file after it's completed, so we make sure that there's actually data in the file. And click OK, and Word starts, and then there's our product table. Close that one. And all right, any questions on exporting? That's pretty simple. Much easier than importing data. Very good. All right, last thing we're going to do is talk about queries. We're going to make some queries. Queries use one or more tables to display your data in a different fashion or a different order. So let's start. It doesn't really matter at this point which table you select, because through your query you have to select different objects from different tables. So just go to the Create tab, and notice in the queries there's two. One is a Query Design Wizard, and one is just Query Design. This class, we're only going to use the design. That way I can show you how to set up these queries. So go ahead and click the Query Design. And it pops up, first thing that's asking you is which table do you want to use for your data. Most of the time queries have more than one table, and all you do is just double click on it to insert into the area down here. So double click customers, then products, then transactions. Notice the screen stays up until you're finished. After we do that, just click close. And there's our three tables. The little black lines here are your relationships. Usually it's a relationship between the primary key, which is here, and it shows how these tables together, notice it's linking the same object. It's how those tables can pull data from each other, and that's how they know each of these tables. That's how the program knows each of these tables exists. Notice that there is a scroll bar here. Just go ahead and adjust these blocks so the scroll bar goes away, and arrange them so it's easier to work with. That way you're not scrolling through it to find it. Okay, so these are our tables, and listed, the table name is here. These are all the fields that exist in our tables. If we look down at the bottom, this is going to be the query that we actually create. So we can take any one of these fields and place them down here and display them in our query. So let's take a look. I'm going to show you what that means. Let's look at the customers table first, and we'll put the first and last name in our query. So just double click the first name, then double click the last name. And notice it throws it down here at the bottom. You have the first one is the field name, which is what we clicked here, and then it's telling you which table it came from. It came from our customers table. And then the checkbox here is on show. Go ahead and click on the run button and let's see what it does. It looks exactly like our table, except for notice the only data that's in there is the first and last name that we just placed. And click over here back on view to go back to the design view. The show here still uses the data in the query, but you won't see it. So let's check the box underneath last name and then run the query again. And it only shows first name, but the last name data still exists if we needed to use it in some kind of calculation. Click back on design view, click back on show. So the difference between the query, one of the main differences between the query and the table is we can use different tables and make it look like it's one table. So we have our first and last name, but now let's take what they've actually let's take the quantity here. Do double click quantity and double click product number. And then double click your transaction date. Now run your query. It looks as though those are just one, like it's just one table, but it's data pulled from several different tables. But as far as looking at this, we have no idea it's from different tables. So without rewriting and copying all this data multiple times, we can create these queries to display the text and the data in any format we like. So click back on the design view. And then let's add two more. Let's do our price and then our stock. Then we can run that once again. So this would be the data from, let me take out those two. Okay. So now we have all of those fields on our query. Let's go back to design view, and I want to take some of them out. So if we needed to remove them, let's scroll. I want to keep the first and last name, but let's remove the quantity. So if you hold the mouse just above the word quantity, notice you get a little black down arrow. That means it'll select the column, so click there and just press delete on the keyboard. It'll remove that. Let's remove the transaction date as well. Now run your query there. So now we've got the customer, a product number, and the amount entered in the stock. Okay. So any questions so far on the query? That's how you create the query, and that's what the queries actually do. So let's go back to design view. The hardest thing about the query is starting to set up criteria. A lot of times you won't only want to You may not want to display all of the text that's involved in these tables, because it could be thousands and thousands of records. So a lot of times you only want to display certain data. So let's run this table, or run this, and let's take a look. So we have our price here, and we have our stock. Let's use the stock column first. So let's say I want this query to show me all the items that have 4 in their stock. All of them that have at least 4. Let's just say 4, not at least. We'll start off with 4. So let's go back to design view. And all of that data that I want is in the stock field. So we come over here to the stock box and go down. Right up underneath show says criteria, and so let's click there, and we only want to show those that have the quantity of 4. So we just tap equal and then do the number 4. Now run your query. Notice the only thing that shows is the items that have the quantity of 4. Back to that. Let's look. Let's remove that criteria and run it again. So now let's look. Let's try. I don't have very many numbers to play with. Let's do 4 or more in our criteria. Now, go back to design view. And so how might we say 4 or more? Equal to 4 is only 4. So if we wanted it to be, it would have to be greater than or equal to 4. So that would be 4 and above. So you just do the greater than sign, and then equal, then 4. And then run that, And notice we get the 4s and the 21. And then the 3 doesn't show. Okay, let's go back to view. What if we wanted everything less than or equal to 4? I'm sorry, I just gave it to you. What if we wanted it 4 and below? It would just be less than or equal to 4. Let's go ahead and run that. And notice we get the 3s and the 4s. We don't see any that are 21. Okay. Questions on that? Another thing we can do is set up what's called a perimeter value. So let's take this, and instead of putting in a value in the criteria, we're going to ask for a value to sort by for whoever runs this query. So you can make a pop-up box display for a value to be entered. So let's go ahead and erase this out of criteria. And what you want to do is open up the brackets. So it's the that right bracket there, and let's type enter quantity. So just do QTY, and then close the bracket. So it should look like this. QTY and close the bracket. This tells the access that you want the user to enter a value there, or whoever runs the query. You can't put any kind of special characters in there. Only special character allowed is a space. So you can't put a period or exclamation point. Okay. Now let's go ahead and save this query. So press the save button. And this query will be customer stock. And press the OK button. And then go ahead and close this query. Now notice we have a new group that has our queries in it. Go ahead and double click that query. And it pops up and asks you to enter the quantity. Go ahead and put 4 in there and press OK. Notice it does the same thing that we were just doing with the criteria, only we're allowing the user to input the data. Let's close that. Double click it again, and let's put a 3 in there. Press OK, and it only shows those of 3. Let's see if it'll let us put in a logic test. I'm not sure. I'm going to try. Let's try it. Close this. Let's double click. Let's try greater than 4 and see if that'll work. I don't know if it'll let us do it or not. Nope. So only values are allowed in there. Okay. So we'd have to put 21 to show the other ones. Okay. So that's creating a perimeter query that asks the user for an input. Questions on that one? All right. Take it back to design view. Actually, let's keep this one. Let's close this. Let's make a new query for this. So close this, and we'll go to create, and then let's go to query design, and we're going to do the products table and the transactions table, and just close that. And expand the table so we can see it. In this case, I want the product name, product number, the price, quantity, and then the stock level. if we run our query, that's what we see. We've got our product name, product number, cost of the product, how many have been ordered, and how many are in stock. Okay, anybody have that one? All right, next part we're going to do is probably the hardest. Well, this is the one that students find the hardest in Access, is creating your calculated fields. So I'm going to go through this, the rest of this lecture. We're going to create a calculated field here. What we want to do is create a field that takes what was ordered and subtract it from the stock amount and place it here. And then we'll make a calculated field that gives us the amount of stock that's on hand, or the amount of product that's on hand. Okay? So we create the calculated fields in the query itself. So let's take a look at that. Go to the design view and you scroll over to this blank field here. We're going to make another row, a column in our query. If we click there, another way to add these is to click and press the down arrow if you didn't want to double click. But here we're going to make our own, so we have to create a calculated field. So the first thing we need to put in there is what our field name will be. So in this case, I'm going to say product on hand. There can't be any spaces on it. So we're going to put in there product on hand. Then in order to tell Access, this is our field name, you have to press put a colon after it. So shift and add a colon. So that means anything to the left of this colon is going to be our field name. Then you start with the calculation. So we want to take whatever value's in the quantity and subtract it from whatever's in stock to get our current on-hand value. So to tell Access, we want the value that's in quantity, we have to wrap the field name in the brackets. So open your bracket and you're going to type quantity. It has to be exactly like that. It's very case sensitive. So quantity with a capital Q. You can look at it here or you can look at it in the table, either way. But it has to match the table in order to pull the data. So Q, UNT91. Then close the bracket. So that tells Access I want to use whatever value is in the quantities field. And then subtract it, so press the minus key. And then from our stock level, so open the bracket, type stock with a capital S, and then close the bracket. There. Now run that query and see what happens. Well, we have to flip them around. We've got negative numbers, so we've probably got to flip our formula around. But notice here's the name, product on hand, and then it takes this value from this value. So we need to switch it around. So let's go back to design view. And if we could go down into the products on hand and change the quantity one to stock, and then the stock to quantity. If you make a mistake and type something wrong, like this, and you try to run it, it's going to ask you for a value. It says there's no such field name in any of these tables, so what value do you want to use? That's what's asking here. So I messed up there and didn't type that right, so cancel. Go over here, UNT, well. Then if you run it, there we go, now we have something we can look at. So after we've sold one, we have our stock level 3. Well, I had a stock level of 3, now we have 2. Does everybody see how that works? triangle. All right, let's try another. Go back to design view. So now we want to see how much our stock costs. So in this case, I'm just going to type, we'll create another calculated field here, and we'll make it say cost. So just say cost, and then press the colon. Then I've got to take whatever value is on my product on hand, and then multiply it by the value of the product itself. So just because it's a calculated field doesn't mean we treat it any different. We can still use this field name in another calculation. So we're going to open the bracket and put our product on hand. So open the bracket. On hand, and then close the bracket there. Then you're going to multiply that, so press the star key or Shift 8 either way. And then we have to multiply that by the price. So we look over here, there's a product price. So open the bracket, capital P, and then close it. And then go ahead and run that. There we go. And we'll take it here, multiply that by this, and then we have our total cost per inventory. Questions on the calculated field? Right, we'll spell it out for you. I'll give you the syntax for the query. You can save that query if you want. Save it as you can save it as costs. So let me give you the syntax for the calculated field. So this is what you need for your calculated field. You have to have a field name. And it's followed by a colon. Inside the bracket is a table. Then you have your operation, and then another field. Okay. Field name cannot contain spaces. This has to be a current table field. Same here. Okay, so this is going to be create field name. So this won't exist. That's the field name that you're going to create. You'll have to type that. Probably assignments will tell you what that is. And then you have to take a current field that already exists in your tables and then perform your operation. It's going to be a mathematical operation of some sort. And then another table, this other field has to exist in one of the tables in your database. Questions? All right, there's 2 questions on there for your calculated field. All right. If there aren't any questions, then your assignments for this week are pretty short. I've taken it down to one skill exam. You don't have to worry about those other projects. And it's one exam, I think it's like 8 questions, so you can go ahead and start on that and work there. If you want to review some of the tutorials after that, just to see some advanced skills for Chapter 10. Also, don't forget about the audio PowerPoint. You're welcome to listen to that as well.